Alright, hello, and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and everyone wants this rally to roll over because they missed it. And this is the same type of thinking that caused them to miss it in the first place. Remember, the most important thing is not about being right or wrong. It's not about trying to pretend like you know what's going to happen. It's just letting the market tell us what to do and staying on the right side. There are plenty of bearish signs out there. The US cycle is now entering downturn mode. And this was last seen during major market corrections, 1990, 2000, 2008, and 2020. Here you can see entering a downturn. So is this game over? Is the melt up cancelled? That of course remains to be seen. The bear market probability model is now at the highest level ever, as you can see here. So is a bear market coming? Well, quite possibly. But the bigger question for me at least is, are all-time highs coming first? Morgan Stanley is saying the S&P 500 could drop 26% in the coming months. However, this to me is an encouraging sign. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that as soon as gold started to get mainstream media coverage and targets of 3K, I started to get incredibly nervous about continuing to push my longs. Shortly after, we ended up exiting the trade and gold has since fallen off a cliff. Morgan Stanley has a very nice track record. You can see this list here. I'm not going to go through reading it all, but the important thing to note is they only have a 10% hit rate. Okay, so when I see headlines like this, is this just the type of fear mongering that the mainstream media likes to push on retail in order to get them to shake themselves out of the market? That of course remains to be seen. There's also a lot of concern at the moment about this 3-letter word right here, which I'm not sure I can say because of the algo. However, whilst everyone is calling for WW3 and saying that this could be the thing that catalyzes the biggest crash ever and blah, 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 show me one of these that has not been net bullish for the stock market. There's never been one, okay? There's never ever been one of these 3-letter words where stocks didn't go up. And you might be thinking, well, how on earth is that possible? And the answer is simple. Because money flow is corrupted, and it is corrupted absolutely. When one of these things occurs, the first thing they do is print a bunch of money. And how much of it ends up going to fund this thing? Actually, surprisingly little. Most of it somehow finds its way into stock markets and risk assets. Data is the data, remember. And if you're not even convinced about that, what if this time is different because we're talking about nuclear type of those 3-letter words? Well, let's look back to the 40s where 2 of these were detonated, as you can see here. And what happened to the stock market afterwards is nothing short of unbelievable, right? But it goes to show you that there are 2 types of investors out there. There are those that trade from the technicals, and there are those that panic in the face of reading mainstream media headlines. Don't let them get to you is my message. It's not like we didn't expect this from JT. I know a bunch of you subscribers, especially the recent ones, are here from JT. So a special shout out to you guys. JT pointed out, look, sneak peek for the week ahead. And he posted this on the 20th of February. He said, US markets are closed today, but he wanted to give a possible setup for the week. He said, based on the chart, a pullback to the top circle is likely, especially with a MACD bear cross bottom circle, support at 39.50 to 39.90, buying opportunity in his opinion. And if we click into here, you can see exactly what he's talking about. So JT absolutely nailed this call. If you've been watching the channel as well, you'll know that I had drawn this red upward sloping support line and said this was the line that I was happy to push the trade. All the while we were above this, and that so far that is where we're holding. All the while we're above this, I'm happy to continue pushing this trade. The futures look to be trying to put in a swing low, so we'll see if this holds. If it doesn't, then I become somewhat bearish in the near term. But all the while, we continue to hold above this and look for this breakout above this downward sloping purple resistance line. I am happy to continue to push trades. I'm even likely going to add a long if we can get above this purple trend line here. So one day at a time, as always, we'll get to the charts at the end of the video. Minavini points out, the market's pulling back as expected. Soaring yields have put pressure on the indexes today, and it also weighed on some of the setups that were looking constructive. As he said, the indexes have made a low, but an effective bottom is not yet in place where stocks are moving in earnest. He said he's been very cautious during this market rally and even more so during the pullback. And this is kind of my stance as well. Once we started to break down and lose these lows here, I said it's time to get a bit more neutral. I took some exposure off. I'm sure you're already aware of that, especially if this is not your first time on the channel. So with the 1-year yield hitting new highs, low put volume and inflation headwinds, in the near term, a pullback that builds to the right side of the S&P base would be normal. The key is to avoid major distribution and significant damage in individual stock charts during a pullback. And I would like to point out, the biggest key for individual investors and traders is to avoid significant drawdown and damage in your trading account and portfolio. That's why when I said it's time to get neutral, there's nothing wrong with that. If I have to give up a little bit of profit, that's fine. But I've protected myself from a move like this, okay? So that's what it's all about. Anyway, let's keep going. We also know Bob Lucas has been calling for this drop into a weekly cycle low, and we are now finally in that timing band. As you can see, we can expect this weekly cycle low to form any week now. We likely are going to find a bottom in the not too distant future. And of course, this shape here would fit with Minavini's base building scenario where we build this right side of the base and end up with something like this, right? I am kind of still expecting to see us pull up and drop down, although that does seem somewhat less likely given the recent price action. We'll know over the coming days. If we can get a dollar breakdown and yields come off, then of course this top scenario is likely. If not, we might have to be open to building more of a base before we can resolve to the upside. James here has massive conviction that the path for the USD for the next 3 months will take the dollar down to a 95 handle, shown in blue here. And he says that this will act as a huge boost for stocks, taking the S&P to all-time high levels in the final blow-off top mid-2023, as shown here in the orange. This, of course, is the primary look. If you've been on the channel, you'll know this is what we're aiming at. Currently neutral, but it won't take much, will it? A few hundred points up, and we can start to look, not even that, I think about 150 points up, and this will start to confirm, and we can start to go back to a full-bore bullish look allocated to risk assets, and we'll also be looking for Bitcoin to form a cycle low anytime over the next, say, 8 or 9 days. I think likely sooner than that. Kush here doesn't seem bothered by the pullback, the breakdown of the bull flag. I would have liked to see this resolve to the upside, of course. However, we got neutral in here, as I keep saying over and over again. But if we can do something like this, bounce off the trend line and recover this sort of channel in here, in this sweet spot, then we can get fully long again and look to target the top of this range up here. Bitcoin, in the meanwhile, Bitcoin just does not care. Bitcoin never cares. Have you noticed this lately? How Bitcoin just keeps doing Bitcoin things? I absolutely love to see it. And even more importantly, Bitcoin's daily correlation to the S&P 500 is flipping negative for the first time since the FTX collapse. Look at this right here. Absolutely insane. So is this the year? Is this the cycle? Is this the time when finally Bitcoin is going to decouple from the stock market? So very encouraging signs here from Bitcoin, and I really, really, really hope this can continue. Speaking of Bitcoin, did you know that Bitcoin adoption in Guatemala is thriving? I've got a small clip here where you can see them accepting Lightning payments for Bitcoin in a cafe in Guadalajara. So gradually, then suddenly, as you can see right here, I love to see it. Speaking of this, global adoption and global payments giant Ingenico are now accepting Bitcoin and crypto payments in France. They have 40 million terminals in 37 countries. Think about the sheer numbers that are flowing into this space. And I do this every single day, and every single day we find more and more examples of this. This cycle is going to be mind-melting. Coinbase is talking about creating a federally regulated Bitcoin and crypto exchange. So is this the next step? I know Coinbase have partnered with BlackRock. Is this the next step where we get this sort of hybrid exchange that is federally regulated and people are able to trade cryptocurrencies as easy and under the same regulations as, say, commodities or even better yet, stocks? Is that what's coming? I would think so. As this space matures, we're going to see the on-ramps become more regulated, more widely available to everybody. And ultimately, this is the only way that Wall Street stays relevant, right? They have to have their part in capturing the sort of on-ramp so they can maintain some level of control over the on and off ramp space. Fitting with this theme, trading platform eToro has gotten a New York BIT license to launch Bitcoin and crypto services. So again, we continue to see the regulatory kinks get ironed out in this space. Over in Hungary, they have their own Bitcoin bar, as you can see here. So absolutely great to see that. Over in Iceland, they are currently the biggest hash rate producer per capita in the world, according to the hash rate index. So again, we continue to see this theme unfold as well. It's not just adoption, it's not just payments, is it? Every single day we do this, and every single day what we find is more and more countries are racing to get hold of hash rate and secure their portion of the network. The Human Rights Foundation has donated 20 Bitcoin worth $500,000 to fund Bitcoin development and projects. Bitcoin is the only ethically sound money on the planet, and this is why it's important that we all exit the system to Bitcoin, as well as gold and silver, of course. This one's somewhat out of context, somewhat not. I didn't really know where to put it. There's no evidence that 3 or 4% inflation does substantial damage relative to 2% inflation. So it's been a while since I've mentioned this on the channel, but it's been a theme that comes back every few months on this channel for a while now. I've been saying over and over again, it's likely that we're going to see them move the goalpost for a 2% inflation target. This was straight from CNBC. So is the new normal going to be higher inflation? Are they going to end up moving the goalpost because 2% is somewhat unrealistic? Depends entirely on whether or not they continue to fudge the CPI calculation, doesn't it? But it's interesting that we've been talking about this on and off for a while, and here it showed up again on my feed. So just before we go into the charts, I want to preface this by saying I posted this yesterday. Look, be cautious here. Bitcoin cycle low due any day now. We'll get to that in a moment. And the S&P due around the same time. The dip is buyable, but then the question becomes, does the bounce follow through or fail? If you don't know what I mean, it means we're looking for a cycle low to form, and then if it fails, it will roll over like this, and it will take out the cycle low that it forms. That will be the trigger for us to know that the cycles have failed. Everything's going to get quite bearish quite quickly. However, come out of this cycle low and then build higher, and I think it's game on. I think risk is going to come on massively strongly. I think the melt up's going to confirm and be validated for the first time since I proposed it all the way back in the summer. So with all that said, let's get into some charts. Here's the dollar. Dollar's starting to pick up a little bit of steam here, isn't it? But I'm still noticing well contained underneath this local high here. No problem there. And even if we run that, I think it will hang up around 107, 108. So that remains to be seen how high it will go. The yields still pricing in higher for longer. So can these roll over? I think if the dollar can top, the yields will come down with them. Unfortunately, we might have to wait a little bit more time before the 2-year yield and the 10-year yield can start to see some sort of declining phase. All the equity markets stopped where you'd want them to stop. So it doesn't mean that we couldn't roll over. It doesn't mean we couldn't hot knife these supports in today or tomorrow's session. But what it does mean is, for now, we have stopped at support and are holding this support. So that's what I wanted to see. The NASDAQ as well, look, right into this blue sort of box that I drew, this blue zone. But if we can hold this, and then particularly if we can break out, that is going to be me adding exposure back, ready for the next leg up, ready to capture some gains. The Dow Jones, as you can see here, has just about wicked this level, but can it recover? I did say all along, really, it's this cluster of lows here that bothers me. All the while we're above those and those lows hold, I don't have any problem pushing this long, and I still think we have a good chance at coming back up here and breaking out. That, of course, remains to be seen, but for now, this is still kind of net sideways, isn't it? As it stands, the VIX currently working on putting in a swing high. So is this going to be a swing high pattern? Does this continue to push up, or is that the top for the VIX? And therefore, is that the bottom for the stock market that we just saw yesterday? The Russell right into the box that I drew when I was calling out this trade ahead of time. I said, look, if we hold this box, and particularly if we hold this box and then break out of this blue downward sloping resistance line, you will see me go long here, and the long will look something like this. Well, so far, and it is early days, but so far we have held right where we'd want to see this market hold. So a little bit of wiggle room either side is fine, but as it stands, like I said, we're still in and we're still looking to see if we can break out. So one day at a time as ever, but so far things look encouraging. The UKX, I think it is time to exit this trade, and I haven't done it yet. And the reason for that is I always talk about using the daily closes, okay? So yesterday we closed right above it, as you can see. We were below the upward sloping red support line for some time, then we wicked back above and ended up closing above. So are we going to see a recovery today? Is that what's coming? Maybe. This is why we use the closes. There is another way to treat this. You could pull this line down and use the wicks, and then you could say that this is just about inside. But to be honest, I think if we close outside of this trade, I've got loads and loads of open profit on here. So I'm not going to tolerate any unnecessary losses. I'm certainly not going to tolerate this coming down below here. I think what I'm going to do today is I'm going to keep an eye on this. If we lose the low of yesterday, particularly in the New York Open, once the New York opens, if we take out yesterday's low, then I'm going to close this trade for a profit. This has been a really, really, really good trade that we've managed to ride the whole way up. So that's fine. If for some strange reason I take my profit off here, I close this trade, and then we see the market stage a reversal and do something like this, then the way I would treat this is the same as we treated this one and the way we treated the first entry here. So we'll just draw a line and then look to add it back on a breakout of that line and target the top of this range. But for now, I've got plenty of profit booked here. So looking to close this trade out, particularly if we take out the wick from yesterday's lows. For the FTSE 100, patience playing off on the metals, so not much more to say about that apart from continue to play patient. We could perhaps entertain on silver now, moving this trend line over. We'll see how this goes. It's still quite steep, but if we can get down underneath these lows here, then maybe there'll be a trade set up in the not too distant future. I noticed the miners are trending much, much, much cleaner. If you see this, look how many touches this line has on the way down. So even though this angle's steep, this is a very clean trend. So I'll be using the miners to see if we can gain some alpha and figure out when the metals are due to break out. If I get rid of this line here and draw another one, you can see it's practically the same story on the way down. So I'll be looking for these to break out. I'll be looking for these to give me a clue to let me know when gold is ready to go. But I don't think that time is yet. I think that time is close, but I think we might need a week or two more before we can see that happen. Here's Bitcoin. Bitcoin continues to do Bitcoin things, doesn't it? So here we are, still long, still strong, still open to seeing a pullback that is buyable, still looking to see a drop into a cycle low. Are we going to get that sometime over the next few days? It's a perfect day 60 low would be on the 28th, and then I think we can resolve higher. But maybe we need to first explode up before we can drop down. I'm open to all outcomes. Anything is possible. But the main thing for me is once we have a cycle low in place, the first thing I want to do is move the stop from down here up to that cycle low, or at least up to here. And then the second thing I want to look for is once we've made our cycle low and start to press on, do we then roll over, come down and take out that low? In which case that is the trigger to tell us that things are actually bearish and it's too early to be bullish on Bitcoin. So that's what I'm looking for Bitcoin. Ethereum is pretty much the same thing. I'm looking to see if we can get a pull down into a cycle low for Bitcoin, and then the stop can come up from here to wherever that low forms. And then it's a case of, does that low hold or does it fail? If it fails, things get bearish quite quickly. XRP still sat on the sidelines, still looking for a break above this red line. So just calling that out ahead of time. I'm looking to get long, but not currently long. MATIC, as you can see, if I flick this onto log, still holding this trend line. So this purple line for me is the line in the sand. Lose this line on a closing basis on log scale and I'll be out of this trade. But for now, happy to push this trade. Happy to look for a bull flag break over the coming days. So we'll see if we can get that from MATIC. Crypto-related equities. So this includes Coinbase here, MicroStrategy, Riot, and Marathon. To be honest, it's the same deal for all of these. Click this off a log, see what's going on. All of these, of course, will follow Bitcoin. So I'm just looking to see if we can find this 60-day cycle low for Bitcoin over the coming few days. And then I think we can treat these exactly the same as Bitcoin and crypto. I think we can move the stops up to wherever the swing low forms. I think we could add exposure if we wanted to. And then we can target a 30 to 40-day run for all of these assets before finding the next 60-day cycle low. So that's the analysis today. If you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe and turn the notifications on if you want to continue to get updates on all my trades in real time as a pro swing trader. In the meantime, enjoy your week. Take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.